Perfect. So thank you all for joining. It is amazing to be with all of you here. This is our third and final webinar on this webinar series, but do not worry that we will have more activities to learn together. So please stay in touch on our social media that we will share more information with you shortly. So in this webinar, we will talk about the fundamentals of wheelchair fitting and user training. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sara Munera. I am from Colombia, and I am the technical coordinator for the International Society of Wheelchair Professionals. I am super happy to be sharing with all of you from around the globe this morning for me in Colombia. I work as a physical therapist, as an International Society of Wheelchair Professionals recognized trainer, both at basic and intermediate level. And I'm also an assistive technology professional and a certified wheelchair service provider. So thank you all who are still joining and saying hi from India, from Canada, from Nigeria. Amazing to have you all here. Just remember that in the bottom part of your screen, you will see a black menu in which you can mute and unmute yourself and start and stop your video. We'll ask you to keep your microphone muted at all times, unless of course you want to talk, feel free to do so at any time. Just go ahead and interrupt, no worries. And you can also see a list of participants and the chat. To use the chat, click the chat button and then make sure you are sending your messages to everyone. You can also choose to send your message directly to Kritika Kandaval for technical support in case you need this. And let's just start this webinar with some positive energy. Please let us know in the chat what made you smile today. I'm reading you all, and I have two screens, so I'm looking at here and here. I have your chat here, so please let us know what made you smile today. And for me, a big reason to be happy and smiling today is to be with all of you, sharing and creating knowledge together. So that's my super amazing thing that has happened today. While you share with us in the chat what has made you smile today, or what will make you smile today if you are just starting your day, I want to remind you that you can add your questions on the chat at any time. I will be reading them throughout, and we will address them either right away or at the end of this webinar. So Edward from Colombia, hola Edward. Today what made me smile was being able to breathe. Wow, so deep and amazing. Thank you so much, Edward. My son asked me to switch off the lights when leaving the room. He's 2. Oh, that is so sweet, Kritika. Thank you for sharing. Ruth, swimming outside on a sunny day. That sounds amazing. I'm so jealous right now, Ruth. Max, I woke up with a beautiful sunset. How cool, amazing. And for Sharmini is Siggy, her dog. Lovely. Great, thank you all for sharing. This is an amazing way to start this last webinar. Being able to join the meeting after so many cancellations due to other assignment, amazing. Thank you so much. Coming to work in a rainy day. I really love these days, Fabiana. Great, thanks, Fabi. Just got back from a road trip from Michigan back to Montana yesterday. Amazing, Mary. Well, thank you all for sharing. And remember that we are encouraging you to become a wheelchair service provider. It is important to be certified, and we definitely want you to get this certification. If you need support on how to do so, please email Kritika. Her email is on the screen. You can see it right now. And we would like you to let us know in the poll what you think are the benefits of being a certified wheelchair service provider. And Kritika will share with us that poll in a second. Those questions in a second. We want to know what you think are the benefits of being a certified wheelchair service provider. And we have some options for you. Maybe it is that it's attractive to employers since you are certified by an international organization. Maybe it supports professional development through exclusive access to continuing education opportunities such as this one. Maybe you can get listed on our website as a certified provider, and you may receive quarterly newsletters with continuing education materials and opportunities. So let's wait for a second and we will share the poll with you all. I'm looking at the chat, someone is sending me direct messages. So let me go back for a second. In the chat box, here you should click everyone so everyone can read your messages instead of sending direct messages to me. So make sure everyone is able to do so. Kritika, if you are here, can you please help us sharing the poll questions regarding why to become a wheelchair service provider?
Sorry, Sarah, is this the one that has options, product preparation, fitting?
No, then never mind. Then we don't have that one. Thank you. And I will share the reason with you all why it is important to be a certified wheelchair service provider. And it is because all of the reasons that I just shared, right? It is attractive to employers since you are certified by an international organization. So it is really important that you can show that you know how to deliver wheelchairs appropriately. You can also get support in your professional development thanks to continuing education opportunities such as this series of webinars that we are wrapping up today, but also more opportunities. You can get listed in our website as a certified provider. So if you are already a certified provider and have not seen this yet, please go to our website and look at the certified information. You can put your name or a country, click find, and then find all of the different wheelchair service providers that are in that specific country. And of course, you can receive quarterly newsletter with continuing education materials and be part of an exclusive listserv. I'm so sorry with all of you. I was not able to look at the question that Kritika shared on the screen, but I just changed my screen and now I'm able to look at it. So we have different responses regarding all of these great reasons to become wheelchair service providers, as you see. So thank you so much for answering, and I'll go back to my slides. So if you haven't attended to our other webinar series or the other webinars in the series, please look at the chat and Kritika will share with us the recordings. And by the end of this webinar, you will be able to list the steps for wheelchair fitting, to understand how to use sitting support devices for reducible and non-reducible body distortions. So remember that this is new terminology that Jackie shared with us on our last webinar. We said that we usually talk about fixed versus flexible positions on the pelvis or on the body, but now we talk about reducible and non-reducible body distortions because nothing is really fixed. It can be flexible toward the other side, going away from neutral. And list the different steps for user training on how to use their wheelchair and how to perform maintenance. So as always, we have a lot to cover. Let's dig in. Remember that we are going to talk about the 3 last steps on wheelchair service provision, which are fitting, user training, maintenance repairs, and follow-up. And as always, we will keep in mind that the user is the center of our process in wheelchair service provision. So when we talk about wheelchair fitting, we want to confirm that the wheelchair, which includes the wheel-based and the seating support system, two important portions of this system as a whole, is appropriate for the user. And we should make any modifications that are needed to ensure a good fit for the user with this particular wheelchair. So the fifth step of the WHO wheelchair service provision is product preparation. So after that, we usually receive the wheelchair in a box with specifications of the measurements that we take regarding the user's need. But this wheelchair is not yet ready to be delivered to the user and to make the user happy, right? We need to make some modifications on the wheelchair. We need to take it out of the box, for example, check if everything is appropriate, and then do some final fitting with the user in the wheelchair in order to make sure that the wheelchair is appropriate for the user. So please let us know on the poll if you are part of product preparation, fitting, or if you are part of both steps. Now I know what I have to do to see when we share the questions here. So around 30% of you have answered. I will give some more minutes so we can have all of you here with your answers. So are you part of product preparation, more like a technical approach? Are you part of fitting, more like a clinical approach with the user? Do you work on both of these steps or on none of these? So I will end the poll and share with you the results. So most of you, 50%, are part both of product preparation and fitting. That is super interesting because in my context, usually in Colombia where I live, usually clinicians are part of fitting and technicians are part of product preparation, but I can see that some of you are part of both. That is super interesting to me. And then 10% are part only of product preparation, the other 10% part only of fitting, and some of you are not involved in any of these steps. Super. Kritika, would you mind confirming that you are actually looking at my PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, Sarah.
Perfect, thank you. I'm making a lot of changes on my screen, so I want to make sure. So great. Then we need to make modifications on the wheelchair to allow that happy user to have an appropriate wheelchair according to all their needs. On the evaluation, we saw the user's body. We used our hands to understand it and recorded those findings or on our notes or on the clinical history of the user. At this point, we will need to go back to our notes and make sure that the wheelchair is appropriate, do some fine-tuning if necessary, which are very small but important changes in order to make the wheelchair work as well as possible for the user. And we need to see if the wheelchair is safe and ready. We also need to understand if the wheelchair is appropriate, the wheelchair and the postural support devices. We need to check the posture, the pressure, and also check the fit while the wheelchair is moving, because the user may be appropriately seated while static, and then when it starts moving, for example, feel some pressure on the back, and then it will modify the posture as well. And finally, we need to decide if any further action is required in order to make additional modifications. So we need to always ensure that the wheelchair is ready for the wheelchair user to try before we actually ask the user to go ahead and sit on the wheelchair. Remember that the World Health Organization has a checklist for us to make sure that we don't forget to inspect any important part of the wheelchair. We need to make sure that there are no sharp edges that could damage the user's body or the skin. that the postural support devices are well padded and are tightly fixed, because if they are not tightly fixed, then the user can fall and have an accident. We need to make sure that no parts are damaged or scratched, that the wheelchair travels in a straight line, that the casters spin freely and without touching the fork, then the bolts in all the wheelchair are tight and the casters fork spin freely as well as the axle and the bolts. So I'm reading here that Mary has a comment. PSD, Mary, means postural support devices. Thanks for asking us to clarify that. So the postural support devices are those parts of the wheelchair that will support the user's body, right? Like the headrest, like the foot supports, like the trunk supports, and so on. Thank you, Mary. So with this list, we will also see the rear wheels, if they spin freely, if the axle bolts are tight, if the tires are inflated correctly, if the push rims are secure. We will see if the brakes function properly, if the footrests and any other postural support devices are correctly attached. If the frame is cross-folding, then we'll need to make sure that it actually folds appropriately. And we need to make sure that the cushion cover is correct, it's appropriate, that it is sitting in the wheelchair correctly, that the cushion fabric is tight, but not too tight, and that the wheelchair has if the wheelchair has a solid seat, we need to make sure that the cushion fully covers the solid seat. So for those of you who are part either of product preparation or fitting, this safe and ready to use checklist will help us either at the end of the product preparation or at the beginning of the fitting to make sure that the wheelchair is adequate and appropriate for the user to go ahead and try it. And at this point, we also need to make sure that the measures of the wheelchair are appropriate according to what we described in the prescription, which was another step that we already did. And remember that we had angular and linear measures, both of the support surface and of the body. So right now we will look at the angular and linear measures of the support surface, which will be the wheelchair. If you haven't seen our webinar on user evaluation, please find the link in the chat. Kritika just shared it, is the recording for webinar number 2. And if you have seen it and loved it, please share it with some of your colleagues so more people are aware of all these different steps on how to perform an appropriate wheelchair user evaluation in order to prescribe a wheelchair. So after making sure the wheelchair is ready, we need to check the wheelchair and the postural support devices, PSD, fit, as well as the posture. We should look at the user's body from the 3 planes of movement and recall the client's desired posture during the hands-on simulation to achieve that posture with the new wheelchair and the new postural support devices. So at the end of the hands-on evaluation, we have an idea on how the users should sit in order to have an appropriate posture. Now, during the fitting, we are going to do that same thing, make sure the user has the appropriate posture according to their postural ability in order to do different activities. So remember to always look at the user from the front, from the side, and from the top, and start the positioning by the pelvis. We then need to check the pressure, both under the ischial tuberosities and between all of the wheelchair user's body and the parts that are in contact with postural support devices. So particularly the supports that are supporting the trunk, we should check for that to make sure that there is not a lot of pressure. It's important to remember that under the ischial tuberosities, we have 3 levels of posture. So of pressure, sorry. So safe, if we are able to move the tip of our fingers 5 millimeters or more. At risk, if we are not able to move our fingertips that much, but we can easily remove our hand. And unsafe, if we cannot move or remove our fingers. So in this picture, we have an example of how to do so. We first talk to the user and explain what we are going to do, why it is important to look at the pressure under both ischial tuberosities. Then we go from the back of the wheelchair, ask the user to lean forward. We put our hands below the ischial tuberosities, and we ask the user to go back to the regular posture, because if we check the pressure with the user leaning forward, the pressure will be, of course, less in the ischial tuberosities. So we ask the user to go back to the normal posture and then start moving our hands and decide if it is safe, if the user is at risk, or if it is unsafe. If the user is at risk or unsafe, then we know we have to do something regarding that cushion because it's not appropriate for the user at that time. We also need to make sure that the user is able to move around on the wheelchair and that he or she has a good posture while moving around. There are some important modifications that can be done at this time. For example, we would need to modify the rear angle position. So please share with us in the poll if that is something that you usually do in your practice. And I'm changing screens again in order to see your answers. And Kritika has just shared in the chat the materials from our second webinar and from our first webinar, because after we finish these meetings, we send recordings as well as books and resources that we just shared. So I just launched our third question. Do you modify the rear angle position during the fitting step of wheelchair service provision? For those of you who are part of fitting, which is like 60% of all of us who are in the call. And the options are never. I never modify the rear angle position. The second answer is I do check if modify the rear angle position is appropriate, but rarely have to move it. And our third option would be, I do check if modify the rear angle position is appropriate and have to move it often. So we would like to see how it is in your practice. Remember that there is no one correct or incorrect. There is no one correct or incorrect answer depending on your context, the type of wheelchairs you have available, the type of users you work with. You will answer one or the other. So half of you have answered. I'll give a couple of more minutes. And Ali is asking us, he just shared in the chat, we do suffer when we do fitting for CP child. Is there any training that we can take? Ali, do you mean, what is the struggling part of it? Is it the user evaluation and the appropriate positioning on the body? Please let us know and we can share some different training opportunities as well as resources. In positioning, perfect. So on our website, we have the both basic and intermediate trainings regarding wheelchair service provision, and there is particular information regarding the positioning of the user. So you can go ahead and look at that. And also, if you did not participate in our last webinar, we shared interesting information regarding how to take measurements in order to appropriately evaluate and then position the wheelchair user. So please, Ali, let us know if that is helpful for you. So I will end the poll and share the results with you all. So few of us, 7%, never modify the rear angle position. Most of us, 54%, check if it is appropriate to modify, but rarely have to move it. And 39%, probably those of you who work with wheelchair users that are more active will need to modify the rear axle. So thank you all for sharing with us how this works for you in your context. And let me share the next slide to talk about the two options that we have on how to modify the rear axle. So we can move it either on the horizontal plane or on the vertical plane. So when we move it on the horizontal plane, here we have the wheelchair. This is the axle. We can move the axle back, as I am showing here in this second image. It used to be here under this red line, and we move it back. It increases the wheelbase. It raises rear stability because we have more separation between those two wheels. So the rear stability is more. And it also interferes with the user's ability to grasp as much as the push rim. So as you can see on this first option, and let me annotate here so we can all see, in this first one, this is all the portion of the reel that the user will have access to. In this second, it will only be around here, probably from a little bit more behind. So the amount of the push rim that the user can actually touch decreases, and that may increase the number of the frequency of the propulsion. It also reduces traction and raises rolling resistance as well as the downhill turning tendency. And when we move the rear axis forward, so the rear axle used to be here, and then we move it forward, we will have the opposite effects. So that is what can happen when we move the rear axle to a horizontal, in the horizontal plane. Our next option, and sometimes we will have to move this in both planes, is to move the rear axle in a vertical plane. I will use this annotation tool once again. So we have the axle here, and when we raise the rear axle, as you can see in this picture, it lowers the seat height, it tilts the wheelchair backwards, lowers rear stability, so it will be easier for the user to perform a wheelie or pop up the casters, and it raises lower stability. And then when we used to have the axle here, and when we lower it, we will have the opposite effects as well. So as I mentioned, sometimes we will have to modify the axle on any of those positions or on both. The important thing during the fitting process is to make a modification, ask the user to see how that feels, and then see if we need to make any further modifications after that. It is important to remember that the changes in the axle position may require compensatory adjustment. So for example, if we move the axle on the horizontal plane, we will have to modify the wheel locks or the caster steam angle. So it's really important to have all of this into consideration. And we will sometimes have to make other modifications that we cannot do during the fitting because it will take more time or different tools that we currently don't have. So we will have to take this into consideration and decide what other further action is required and when we will do those modifications. Perfect. So we talk about the fitting process, and now we're gonna enter a little bit more about the user training. And we want you to let us know on the following poll if you think that we, as wheelchair service provider, should know how to train the user on all of these options. So we want to know if you think that we should be able to train the user on skills, on transfers, on how to handle the wheelchair, on how to perform maintenance, on how to take care for the skin, and on what to do if there is a problem. So do you think wheelchair service providers should be able to train the user on all of these, maybe some of these, Maybe some other you think are specialized for some particular training facilities. And half of you have answered the poll, so I'll give a couple of more minutes to allow everyone to participate. Amazing. I will stop the poll now and share with you the results. So we all think we should know how to perform all different training activities, right? On skills transfer, how to handle the wheelchair, how to perform maintenance, how to take care for the skin, and what to do if there is a problem. And this is really important because if we refer the user to another training facility in which they are experts, for example, in wheelchair skills, or another facility is expert in wheelchair maintenance, then it might decrease the number of users that actually get trained. So it is important that if we work on a facility that delivers wheelchairs, all our professionals are trained on how to explain the user all of these different activities. And it is likely that we will need different sessions in order to do this training. So after the fitting, we can see if the user needs another session or 3 more sessions in order to learn how to perform particular skills, on how to do maintenance, and so on. So in terms of skills, there are a lot of skills that a wheelchair user may need in order to move around and to participate in different activities that he or she likes. Some skills are basic and some others are more advanced. We need to make sure that the user is trained on the different skills they need to perform the activities they want. Dalhousie University's Wheelchair Skills program has amazing tools to teach manual and power wheelchair users, as well as caregivers, how to perform different skills. So we encourage you to visit their website to learn more about how to train your users. And Kritika will share this, she already did, the link with you all in the chat in case you want to learn a little bit more about how to perform appropriate wheelchair skills training. In terms of transfers, there are particular techniques to protect the user's body when transferring from one surface to another surface. And the University of Pittsburgh has developed a suite of wheelchair safety courses on training as well as on maintenance. So we will share in the chat as well the links to all of these resources, so you can go ahead, take a look and dig deeper onto how to train the user on all of these particular activities. The user should also learn how to take care of his or her skin by using a pressure relief cushion, by using pressure relief techniques, eating well and drinking water, by avoiding friction and moisture, and checking the screen every day and changing positions regularly. And remember that we do have a poster from the WHO explaining to the user how to do all of these different activities in order to take care of their skin. And we should also train the user on what to do if there is a problem with his or her wheelchair. Wheelchairs can cause problems due to improper fit, maintenance and repair issues, and acute injuries, for example, due to tipping over. Also, the long-term use of a wheelchair can adversely affect the health of the user due to chronic or repetitive stress, for instance, affecting the shoulders, the peripheral nerves, and the skin. So to avoid all of these problems, we should provide appropriate fitting and user training to all of our users, which are the 2 steps that we talked about today. To ensure appropriate wheelchair service provision, we need to have trained personnel. And we want to thank you all your commitment to improve your knowledge and to be a great wheelchair service provider. The discount code for those of you interested on becoming certified wheelchair service provider is ISWP Web 3. You have that discount number on your screen, so take a picture of it so you can use it while you are becoming a wheelchair service provider. Contact ISWP Research Training Coordinator Kritika Kendeval at her email that is also on the screen for more information on how to become a certified wheelchair service provider, or you can also visit our website. That was all we wanted to share with you today. If we have any questions or comments, we have some time to address them. So please feel free to open your mic or write your comments on the chat. And I will stop sharing my screen now. We will give some minutes in case anyone finds the courage to open the mic. Mary, I love your question in the chat. Thank you very much. Mary is asking us about power assist on manual wheelchairs. It is really important, Mary, that during the evaluation, we understand if the user needs a manual wheelchair, a power wheelchair, or a manual wheelchair with power assist. And of course, that will modify the prescription that we do, and that will also modify the fitting, and that will have to include additional training, particularly on skills on how to use the power assist. We are going to have some other series with experts on particular topics, and we will make sure, Mary, to talk about power wheelchairs as well as power assist. So once again, please take a look at our social media, and we will share more information on when this new series of webinar will be taking place. Thanks, Mary, for your comment. If there is anything you want to comment regarding power assist and manual wheelchair, please feel free to do so. Also, weight of chair versus rock terrain, of course. Amazing topics. Yes, there are a lot of different aspects that we have to take into consideration when evaluating a wheelchair user, and based on all of that, selecting the appropriate wheelchair. And Kritika just shared with us our Facebook page. We will share their information on our next training activities and continuing education opportunities. So please feel free to join us there. And Sharmini shares, as usual, very engaging training. Thank you, Zara and Kritika. Nice illustrations to explain the axle positions. Thank you, Sharmini. Feel free to use them. We will share the presentation as well as the recording and all the other materials we have shared on an email after this. So thank you all. If there are no other questions or comments, someone from Easy from USA Virginia, please feel free to open your mic.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thank you. I really appreciate what you're doing. I have a long time since I saw your program, but I didn't get a chance to participate. But today, fortunately, I get released from work early, so I joined this part only. So I want to get from the beginning of any webinar you did on this wheelchair handling. The situation with us is we're handling students, wheelchair users at school and school transportation. So even though you didn't mention anything about that, I can relate it to our workplace, what you already did this today and the previous ones. So I want to get all, if possible, the ones you did, I think this one is the third one. I didn't do first, second. So if you don't mind, if there is any way I can get the other two. And I really appreciate it.
Definitely. No, you're very, very welcome. We love doing these webinars and sharing with you all and learning from you all. Kritika just shared on the chat the recording of the webinar number 2 and the recording of the webinar number 1 and number 2. You can click those, but we will make sure to send a follow-up email after this call with all of the links to the 3 recordings on this series. And it's amazing that you get released earlier for work today. Definitely a reason to smile and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We have a comment on the chat, more training on how to risk assess compatibility of power assist with the type of chair will be great. I heard some incidents of people thrown out of wheelchairs from attaching power assist retrospectively after they bought their manual wheelchair. That is a really interesting comment, and we will make sure to add that when we talk about power wheelchairs and manual wheelchairs with power assist. But definitely that is something that we have to take into consideration when we are evaluating a user, the current needs as well as the things the user may need over time, because we need to make sure that the wheelchair we are prescribing today is going to support the user throughout the time. And Mary comments that she believes PERM will address that issue. Thanks, Mary. And Ali is asking us where to take training on intermediate level and advanced, and I'll ask Kritika to share our website with you all. We do have online training there regarding basic user evaluation, like all these WHO steps for basic and intermediate users. So we will share that with all of you on the chat as well as on the follow-up email. Well, thank you all for your participation today, for joining us. There is our website, so feel free to click that and it will be on your browser after we finish this call. Thank you all. Have a great day, afternoon, and evening, and we'll see you soon on another webinar series.
Thank you. Bye.